Hi, everyone. My guest today is Karen Rowe, and we are just so fortunate to have her because she is a #1 international best-selling author. She's the owner of Front Rowe, Rowe, because that's what her name is, Front Rowe Seat, a full-service writing firm. And she's an expert in nonfiction. And if you're thinking about writing a book, she can help you position yourself as a leading authority in your niche. Through her proven system, Book at the Beach, she's known for helping elite alpha male business owners get their books written in 3 days or less. So, if she can do it with them, she can sure do it with you. Her clients include an actor, a retired FBI agent, a reality TV star, entrepreneurs with online empires, and some of the top self help leaders in the industry. Her mission is to help you find your voice and uncover your own unique and powerful story to create an instant connection with your marketplace. She has worked on more than 40 book projects and is the author of 5 of her own books, including Mass Influence, The Habits of the Highly Influential, which she co authored, and Behind the Cover, a ghostwriter's guide to authoring your own business book. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's such a pleasure.
Well, it's interesting. I know that everybody has a book inside themselves, and yet everybody says, "Oh, I can't write," or I just talked to a few people this weekend, and I could not believe how long it's taken some of them to write a book. And
Yeah.
I know people who lock themselves almost like in a closet for 3 days and get it all written. I know others that take forever. So, what what do you think is the biggest problem that most people encounter with writing a book, and how long do you think it should take?
Well, those are great questions. What I would say is that the biggest problem that people encounter with writing a book is not getting enough support. They often try and do it on their own, and they don't have a really clear and specific non-negotiable external deadline. For me, what's been the most successful every single time I've written a book is having that non-negotiable deadline, because I don't know about you, but I will find any which way to get myself out of something, no matter how committed or motivated I am with it. And the most successful things I've ever seen is when people schedule, for example, a book launch or schedule an event and they invite people. They schedule a venue and put dollars down. They get a sponsor involved. Once you have that community developed where you're like, okay, I'm really putting myself out there, and now other people are believing in me, it matters if I finish this book. So I think that that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make, is not really having a plan, and they're just writing and they'll finish it when they finish it. And the problem with that is that it doesn't get finished. Or, we've all heard the stories of people that have been working on it for 10 years or 5 years or 20 years. And how long I think it should take once you start, I really think that to be reasonable, that you should have it published within the year. I specialize in completing books of high quality with velocity. So we can do it, on a 3-month timeline or a 6-month timeline, but we're professionals and we have a whole team. If you're doing it, self-guided, DIY, do it yourself, then I think a year is a reasonable timeline, to get the book done.
But you're talking about, when you say get the book done, you're talking about getting the book in your hot little hands. I mean,
Right.
published and so. But how long do you, as a professional,
Mm-hmm.
if you decide today that you're writing a book and just to get
Right.
the manuscript done, how long should
Yeah.
the manuscript take?
Well, I mean, 3 months. I do it in 3 days. But again, that's, me with a team of people. We get the first draft done, and then we get it edited, and we have it all scheduled. So, just to get it written so that you can submit it to an editor, I would say 3 months is a really reasonable a really reasonable timeline. And that's being generous.
That's a good, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know people who have locked themselves in cabins, who have gone to a hotel and rented a room and then just slugged it out over the weekend. However, you're bringing up a really, really good point, and that is editor. Now, there are a lot of people who might just write a book and they don't realize that it needs to go to an editor. So why does it need to go to an editor, and what does an editor do?
Well, there are different types of editors, so that's a great question. And editors will basically make you sound better. So they have the added benefit of being an objective and qualified observer of what you're trying to say. So different, a structural edit, which is typically the first type of edit that you would do, they would take almost a 50,000-foot view of the manuscript and basically tell you, does it make sense? Does it read properly? What's missing? Was I confused? What did you mean here? Well, some suggestions and recommendations for content. Why don't you add X or Y here? They will look at it structurally, so does it flow from beginning to end? And then as it evolves, obviously we look at grammar and spelling and all those sorts of things, but it's really to tighten up your words and really get your meaning across so that it's impactful for the reader.
So this editor, I'm just thinking of, me. And, I've written several books. But I have not, I've gone to an editor. Well, my very first book was very interesting. My very first book was picked up by Berkeley. And it was very weird how it all happened. And it went all over the world, which was wonderful for me because it got me extra speaking gigs. I mean, I went to Indonesia, and when they knew that I was coming, and my book, of course, was in the bookstore, and then I was the celebrity, and they hired me a week, and the same thing happened in Singapore, and so forth. But would an editor, I hate to say this, but would an editor ever say to you, this is junk? I mean, this is just not good, and the poor person is just absolutely, totally deflated?
I mean, a good editor wouldn't tell you that your work is junk. They would probably come back to you and say it needs more work and give you suggestions for what work is needed to have you bring it to the level and caliber that would be required for what you're talking about, which is potential to get picked up by an editor, and go on speaking tours and things like that. They really are there to strengthen the quality of your work and make sure that your message gets delivered and communicated in a way that other people can understand it.
And what about people who just have a message to get out, and it's important to them, but it might not be important to anybody else?
So that's not necessarily the job of the editor. That's where you would want to maybe, what I do as a ghostwriter and collaborative author is look with the client from the beginning and with the author from the beginning in terms of what's your end game here? Like, what is it that you want to accomplish out of out of writing this book? And part of that is to make sure that your message that's important to you makes a difference with the reader. So working with them to be like, okay, but no one cares about that message, even if you do, but here is what they do care about. So how can we take the idea and the energy and the content that you have and make it relevant to things that matter to other people?
Well, I think, that brings us to the point of ghostwriting. Is that considered cheating? I've never had a ghostwriter, so is that considered cheating? Well, of course, who ghostwrites, all the celebrities. I mean, you always see Jane Doe as told to, or, that kind of thing. But if it's a person who is not a celeb necessarily, is that considered cheating, or do a lot of people do that?
Well, you may be surprised to learn that about 40% of the books on the market are ghost written. And the whole reason we are called ghost writers is because you don't know we're there, right? We are ghosts. And so sometimes the ghostwriters will have a byline on the cover, like you just said, as told to, if you notice, for example, Deepak Chopra's books now often have, authored with, that you've probably never even noticed because it's Deepak Chopra. And really, I don't think it's cheating. And here's why. It's because I am taking the author's content and just making them sound good. So I like to call it collaborative authorship in terms of taking your skills and talents. I mean, one of the things that some people find challenging is that they're not sure if the content or ideas they have is any good. So ghostwriters will help you give feedback on what's good and what isn't. At this point, having been in the business for 10 years, I've pretty much read it all and heard it all. So what I'm looking for is what haven't I already read or heard, and what's really unique to this specific author. The other thing is often my clients are too busy and successful that finding the time required to sit down and write on a regular basis is just a near impossibility. So what I offer is just a way for them to get the book done without them having to sacrifice their work time or their family time. So it's not, I'm not writing, it's not that I'm pretending, writing my own ideas. It's their content, it's their vision, it's their message, it's their ideas. I'm just getting it on paper and into a book so that they can start and make a difference and get out there with their book and with their message.
So you really have to write it in their voice.
Right.
And
yeah.
You have to, what do you do though, Karen? Do you have to study up on all these subjects? I mean, you must be a walking encyclopedia,
Well, I mean, that's why I work closely with the clients. So really in my process, I sit down with them with this book at the beach for 3 days. And basically the idea is that I get everything that I need from them in those 3 days with respect to the content and their vision and their end message and their end goal, so that they can walk out of there at the end of the 3 days with, knowing that their book is in good hands, because then we take it over and project manage it. So it's as if I then am replacing them, so that I get to know in that time, they would never say it like this. This doesn't quite sound like them. And then, of course, the author is reviewing it at every phase as well, in terms of saying like, oh, no, that's not quite right, or I wouldn't say it that way, and things like that, right? So that we really get a sense of what, to have it sound like them. Otherwise, we're not really doing our job.
So what if I don't know what to write about? I mean, I would assume I would, but I know that everybody says, oh, you have to have a book. So let's just say I'm not just an average person. I'm someone in business, or I have a hobby or whatever. I mean, and I just say, well, I don't know what to write about. Where do I start?
Well, I would start with, if you are running a business and you have people on your staff or in your company, start talking to them, get feedback from the outside, because sometimes it's hard for us to see because we're swimming in the water and we're like, what water, So for us, we might not really realize necessarily what it is that sets us apart from other people. In my experience, though, most business owners do that work so that they're able to talk to people about what they offer in terms of their products and services. So it's often just, what I would say is, if you don't have a team, then ask yourself, what is the problem that you solve for people? And start from there.
So, would you say, I mean, you hear about this all the time in the movies and in TV shows, you see the people, pulling the paper out of the typewriter or the computer, and they can't, oh, it's terrible. And they're surrounded by all this crumpled up paper. Is there such a thing as writer's block? I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think writer's block is really just I don't really believe in writer's block, because I don't think there's things like, if you look at a tradesman, there's no such thing as carpenter's block or plumber's block. Like, those guys, don't have stuff in their way. So it's really just in your head. It's really just resistance. And if you dial that down even more, it's fear. So writer's block is really just that we're confronted with something that we haven't dealt with yet in terms of, often it's a fear of success or it can be a fear of failure. And there is also this whole, who am I to write a book, or what I have to say isn't valuable. So that's what I find typically gets in the way and what can be described as writer's block. But what I recommend when you're stuck is to just take any action that you can. So if it's not, what would be the next thing that you could do to keep your book project moving forward? So one of the things I've done is, for example, just work on, I'm going to go and order my ISBNs, which isn't technically writing, but it's still moving the book forward. And there's all kinds of strategies. Like one of the best things that's ever worked for me is to actually take a break from it and walk away and then go work on something else. And then come back to it. And it's almost like a bit of a mind hack. By the time I come back to it, I may have forgotten what was stopping me. And then the other thing that really works is not to edit the work until the first draft is done. So break your writing down into, I say if you can write 7 minutes every morning and don't look at the previous day's work, that's one way to keep momentum. And there's all kinds of other things, you can use writing prompts and things like that just to get you writing. You can do morning pages just to keep that writing flow, even if it's not related to your specific book topic. Those are just a few simple strategies. And then I just wrote a book, as you mentioned in my introduction, in February, and I have a whole chapter on what to do when you get stuck and when you have writer's block to just keep yourself writing. I think I have about 12 different strategies in there.
Fantastic. Well, again, these are all things that I've heard different viewpoints on since I've written books, and I attend things like writers' seminars and, and about the cover of the book. Some people say put your picture on the front. Some people say put your picture on the back. Some people say don't put your picture at all. So where do you come in by what should be on? Because they say, do you really judge a book by its cover? So what should be on that cover?
Well, people really do judge a book by its cover. And what I say is it's the second most important part of the whole entire book. And its purpose is to get people to pick up the book and turn it over and read the back cover, and open it and then eventually buy the book. If they're buying it online, the purpose of the cover is to get them to click on it. So I have an opinion about having your face on the cover, and it's essentially, unless you're a well-known celebrity like Dr. Oz or a president or something like that you're wasting valuable real estate. No one knows who you are yet. That's why you're writing a book. So use that to really communicate what you want the cover to communicate for your reader, so that they'll pick it up and buy the book and eventually become one of your raving fans. For the back cover, I think it's personal preference, although the tendency is to include your headshot and your About the Author bio on the inside back page. You can sometimes include a picture and an abbreviated bio on the back cover, but again, that's valuable real estate that now people are starting to use, for testimonials and a brief synopsis of the book. So, but the back cover, I think, is really your option and your preference. If you already have a strong following of people that do know you, then it might be nice to include it on the back cover. But the front cover, I say, is a no-no, unless you're, Bill Clinton or or Oprah or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your opinion on, there's also a lot of debate about whether books are going out of style, and that people prefer to read on their Kindle or whatever. And, and other people say, oh, I like having that book in my hand. And I'm one of those. I like to have the book in my hand. I like to read it in front of me, not on a machine. So where do you stand on that? And what are the statistics, actually?
Right. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head. What I do know is that the state of the publishing industry has completely transformed in the last, 5 years, certainly, but it's constantly evolving. You're absolutely right. The publishing industry isn't the way it was 20 years ago or 5 years ago. And I think that books aren't going out of style. Even if you have them on Kindle, that's still a published book. And typically, anyone who has a Kindle book also has a physical book. And I think especially with, an over 50 crowd, people still like to have their book in their hands. Millennials and the younger crowd may be more used to having a Kindle and things like that. But really, books are hotter than they ever have been. I think everyone who is a speaker or a trainer or an entrepreneur or a business owner can benefit from having a book in terms of establishing their expertise and credibility. If you're wanting to build a speaking career, you have instant authority. And the other thing about having a book, which is great, is that you now have readers that really get to build a relationship with you without you being there. And it speaks for you in your absence, right? So it's like having a representative or an ambassador that goes out for you, and it never gets tired and it never gets sick. And it can even go along in your absence, like in the tub sometimes. So I think that there's huge benefits to having it. And although books are evolving, I wouldn't say that they're going out of style. I think the thirst for knowledge is always going to exist, no matter what format it is that we're consuming it in.
And do you have a thought about hardcover versus softcover or size of the book?
I do. In general, I mean, unless you're doing a cookbook or a children's book, I would stay away from hardcover just for the simple fact that it's twice the cost. And so, and again, people aren't, what I would say is people aren't spending as much money on books as they used to. So it's not uncommon to have, Kindle books for 99 cents and even offered free plus shipping for physical books. So if you can offer a paperback in a lower cost, let's say $10 or $12 or $14, a hardcover, you would have to, have it maybe over $20. So for the most part, I really recommend going with paperback. And then there's standard cover, standard sizes 5x8 and 6x9. So depending on the length of your book, either one of those would work.
Well, now you have a website. Is that the best way to have people contact you?
Absolutely, or they're, free to reach out to me at any time. My email is my name, Karen at KarenRowe.com, and that's ROWE. Feel free to reach out to me. I always love to hear people's book ideas. That's my favorite thing. I do have a website that's KarenRowe.com, and I also have an NYCWritersCamp.com. Once a year, I do a writer's retreat, sometimes in Florida, sometimes in New York City, sometimes both, depending on demand. So those are all great ways to reach me. I'm also all over social media, on Facebook and Twitter at Front Rowe Seat.
Well, everybody, we do this we take a break and we come back with Karen, and that's what we're going to do. But as you can see, she is just a wealth of information. And I know that there are some of you listening to this who are just, you want to write a book. You just feel you have something to say, and I don't blame you. And I think it's really, really important for you to start thinking about, how can I use this? What kind of message can I give? What have people come up to me and always said, you're so good at, or always seem to get me in a question about something. And I think those are all things that are important. So we're going to take a break now. We'll be back in just a few minutes. So hang in there, and we'll be back with Karen Rowe.